Welcome back to episode 4 of the Just Start Sewing series. If you made it through the last few episodes, congratulations. That was a lot of head knowledge. And today we're actually going to get into the nitty-gritty. We're going to get our hands on a paper pattern and fabric and start the process of sewing something. In today's episode, we will look at how to choose a beginner sewing pattern, talk about the 2 printing options, take measurements for sizing, figure out how much fabric we'll need, head out and get our supplies, and then we will cut out our pattern. Let's dive in. When you're starting out, you will usually come across 2 types of patterns. You have commercial patterns. These are ones you'll see at craft stores. These are physical patterns such as Simplicity, Butterick, and McCall's. They come printed on a thin tissue paper. The other option is PDF patterns. These are digital patterns that you purchase and download, and then you go print them out yourself. Personally, I love PDF patterns. They're really easy to shop for online, and you get to support indie pattern makers by using this option. Your first tip for finding a pattern is obviously to look for a pattern that's labeled as beginner or easy. And my next tip would be to read the reviews. I love looking on Etsy for patterns by indie pattern makers that have lots of reviews and photos of what the sewists have made. I also like to find the pattern hashtag and search that on Instagram to see what people have made. Do be mindful that not all patterns are created equal. Some cheaper ones online that can be AI generated can have unclear instructions and really poor fit. My very first pattern was like this. I bought it for $4. It was not well put together and the instructions were so confusing. So please take my advice, spend a little bit more money, support an indie artist or a small pattern maker. They will have very clear instructions and the pattern will have been thoroughly tested over lots of different body types. Some good advice from Nicole when she was looking online. She looked for patterns that had a video of the pattern designer wearing the garment. There's also a lot of pattern makers you can follow on Instagram and see updates for when their patterns are released. Some patterns will have a few options or what are called views. Pay close attention to these as it's easy to mix up when you start assembly. A different view is just a different variation that the pattern maker offers. It could possibly be a sleeve length or a dress length, or maybe it has buttons or doesn't, but you will want to follow all the instructions pertaining to your chosen view, whether that's A, B, C, and so on. Nicole sorted through some beginner patterns online and we together landed on the Skyline Dress by Sydney Graham. This is a great beginner pattern. Her patterns have very clear instructions. They're tested very thoroughly and loved by the sewing community. It includes some great beginner steps like stay stitching, gathering stitches, and making your own bias binding. So I think Nicole is going to be very happy with this pattern. The first real step of following a pattern is taking your measurements. Typically, you will only need to take 3, your bust, your waist, and your hips. Sometimes you'll need upper or lower bust, but in most cases, you just need those 3 measurements. I like to make note of these in my notes app to reference for later, but by now I do have them memorized. Always compare your measurements to the size chart included in the pattern you're working on. Sewing pattern sizes don't always match up with ready-to-wear sizing. These are the sizes you'll see in, say, Target or Old Navy, so don't go by the number that you usually wear in your store-bought clothes. We took Nicole's measurements and it put her at a size 18, so that's the size we'll be using moving forward. Once we know the size, the pattern tells us how much fabric we need. This is called the fabric consumption chart. You will follow the X and Y axis to find how much you need. Most patterns do have 2 fabric width options. When shopping, you can find the fabric width on the end of the bolt, or if shopping online, it should show the width of the fabric. Most commonly seen are 45-inch width or 60-inch width. So obviously with wider fabric, you need less yardage. With narrower fabric, you need more yardage. Remember here in the fabric consumption chart to look at your chosen view. For Nicole's size, we need 2 7/8 yards of fabric, which we will round up to 3 just in case. I always recommend buying a little bit extra just in case you make a mistake. And it's great to have leftovers. Once we've chosen our pattern, every pattern will tell you which notions you need. Remember, these are sewing accessories. This might be buttons, zippers, interfacing, bias binding, or elastic. So we'll double check what we need before we head out to get our supplies. For the Skyline dress, all we need is bias binding, which you can buy in store, but we are going to make our own, and matching thread. Super easy. Now let's talk about actually printing the pattern. I prefer printing on A0 sheets. These are wide format sheets at my local copy shop. I just think it's easier than taping little pieces of paper together. But if you only have access to a home printer or a print shop like Staples, you can print your pattern in US letter and then you tape the pages together before cutting out your size. Either way works. Some people find taping the pieces together, or what's called tiling, is very meditative. So try both and see what works better for you. I also find the A0 is cheaper at my personal copy shop. If you have more questions about that, ask below. Next up is shopping for supplies. Nicole and I went to the thrift store and then Hobby Lobby to look for some fabric. Your pattern will also tell you the suggested type of fabric needed for your pattern. For example, cotton or linen, a mid-weight denim, a fabric with drape or stretch, and so on. It's definitely best to follow these suggestions. When you get your fabric home, whether it's thrifted or newly bought, please pre-wash it because it can shrink later on. Nicole actually didn't end up finding anything at the thrift store or the fabric store that she loved, but she had this thrifted top sheet, and we are going to use that as a sort of muslin and then hopefully find some fabric she loves for the final piece. We love using thrifted materials around here, especially when it's your first time sewing. It's such a money saver and a stress saver. You don't want to use nice expensive fabric for something to not turn out well. So I love that she had this laying around, and I think it's going to be pretty cute. If you want ideas for places to find fabric online, we can do another video on that, but I will list off a few here. I like Blackbird Fabrics. I like small businesses on Etsy like the Shibori tie-dye, and I have also used a familiar chain spot like Michael's or Hobby Lobby. But if you've seen my other videos, you know that my favorite place to source fabric is from the thrift store. Once your pattern is printed and your fabric has been pre-washed, it's time to cut your paper pattern out in your size. Whether you used US letter and tiled the pieces together or A0 big sheets, you'll need to follow the cutting size lines. There will be a legend in the top corner of your pattern that shows you the notches and lines that indicate your size. I like to mark my size with a pen just so I don't get lost within all the different notches and markings. It's easy to do, so I do recommend marking these out first. You can also use an Adobe pattern reader and separate the files to print out just your size. I've never done this before, but I've heard it's really nice. You may want to cut out all of the pattern pieces or just the ones pertaining to your chosen view. That's up to you. After the paper pieces are all cut out, you'll look at the cutting layout in your pattern. This shows you how to lay the paper pattern pieces on the fabric so you don't waste any fabric and so you follow the correct grain lines. If you need a refresher on grain lines, we discussed this in episode 3. The arrows on the pattern pieces indicate which direction you want the vertical grain line of the fabric to match up to. For ease, just lay it parallel to the fabric's edge. On the fold is a term you'll see a lot when cutting out a pattern. This means the pattern piece is cut on the folded edge of the fabric, which saves you time cutting and saves on printing. Simply fold the fabric over to the width of your pattern piece and lay the arrows pointing towards the folded edge. The last prep step before actually cutting is called transferring markings. Patterns can often include darts and pleats to help with structure, and these will be shown on the pattern but need to be transferred onto the fabric. More commonly in beginner patterns, you'll see notches, typically a small bold dash that will act as a guide to help you line up everything later. Using tailor's chalk or a washable pen, transfer those marks directly onto your fabric for easier assembly later. Each pattern piece will be numbered or lettered, and it will tell you how many of each piece you need to cut out. As an example, pattern piece 1, cut 2 of them on the fold, or piece E, cut 2 on the bias. These 2 arrows that are making a cross represent cutting something on the bias, which we talked about is the stretchiest point of the fabric. Now that our fabric is laid out, it's time to go for it and cut into it. Double check that things that need to be on the fold are on the fold, that grain lines are straight, and then just go for it. It's okay if it's a little bumpy. And that's it for today. We've picked our pattern, we've got our fabric, we cut it out, and now it's ready to sew. In the next episode, Nicole is going to start assembling her dress and really bring it to life. If you are sewing along, let me know in the comments what pattern you chose and what you're working on. I would love to hear from you and see what you're making. See you in episode 5. Cheers!